At first, no one understood what was happening. People simply began to notice a strange sensation, as if something were slipping away from within. A slight emptiness beneath the skin, like after a dream that's forgotten too quickly. Only this time, the forgetting didn't stop. The memories didn't vanish suddenly, they leaked slowly, drop by drop, leaving behind a vague uneasiness. A person might remember a fact, but lose the feeling associated with it. Joy faded, pain dulled. No one yet called it a memory leak, but the body was already beginning to give up what had previously belonged only to the mind. Very soon, the leaks became visually noticeable. Memories manifested as translucent traces, a fine mist, faint images, sounds that couldn't be discerned. They escaped through the palms, the breath, sometimes the eyes. Some left behind fragments of children's voices, others, the silhouettes of places they hadn't been in a long time. The city was filled with the ghosts of other people's lives. The streets became like an archive no one had asked to be opened. People walked, trying not to look where they were stepping, because every step could tread on someone else's pain or happiness. Scientists tried to explain what was happening. They talked about an overload of neural connections, about the body as a vessel that could no longer withstand the accumulated experience. But no theory could answer the main question: why did the leaks begin simultaneously in everyone? People felt it wasn't a disease or a mutation. It seemed like a natural process, as if humanity had reached the limit of memory. Too much had been lived through, remembered, and repressed. The body could no longer hold it all inside. Panic came later. At first, people lost small things: the taste of a favorite dish, the feel of a summer breeze, the feeling of safety in a familiar room. But then faces began to disappear. Not names, exactly faces. A person could know they loved someone, but not remember what that someone looked like. Photographs no longer helped, they seemed empty, devoid of connection. Relationships began to crumble not because of conflicts, but because of leaks. Love without the memory of shared moments became an abstract idea. The first attempts to stop the process emerged. People wore thick gloves, masks, and special suits, hoping to seal the body. They avoided emotions, because strong feelings accelerated the leakage. Cities became quieter. Laughter was considered dangerous, tears wasteful. Schools taught children not to get attached, not to remember too vividly. The world began to value emptiness as a form of protection. But the more a person tried to hold on to memories, the more painfully they burst forth. Over time, it became clear, leaks couldn't be completely stopped, but they could be channeled. Memories began to be collected. They were stored in special repositories, sorted by theme: joy, fear, guilt, love. People came there to look at their own past, now separated from them. It was like a museum of personal lives. Some felt relief, seeing their traumas on the surface. Others felt horror, realizing how much they'd lost without even realizing it. But the strangest thing came later. People noticed that not all memories leaked equally. The first to disappear were those that had been repressed, ignored, or deemed too painful. The body was ridding itself of what the mind refused to accept. Leakage became a form of honesty for which the person was unprepared. Everything unlived found its way out. And the more a person denied their past, the faster it left them forever. Over time, people began to notice differences. Some lost memories quickly, as if their lives were a leaky vessel. Others barely leaked at all. This divided society. Those with severe leaks were considered unstable, empty inside. People were afraid to hire them, and they weren't trusted with important decisions. A fear arose: if a person loses the past, is he or she capable of taking responsibility for the future? Memory became the currency of reliability, and its leakage a social threat. Children were the most vulnerable. Their memories flowed vividly and chaotically, colors, sounds, and images that were impossible to retain. Parents tried to remember for them, to capture every moment, as if they could preserve childhood in words. But the more adults clung to the child's memory, the faster it disappeared. The world understood: memory cannot be transmitted, even if it leaks out. It remains part of the body, even when it leaves it. Those who learned to read the leaks emerged. They looked at the shapes, density, and speed of the leaks and could tell what a person had experienced, what they feared, what they were hiding even from themselves. This destroyed the concept of personal privacy. The pain of others was no longer invisible. But with understanding came fatigue. To see too much was to stop feeling. Compassion began to dull, because suffering became the daily background. Some people deliberately accelerated the leak. They believed it was easier to live without the past than to constantly feel its passing. Such people became empty, but calm. They were not tormented by regrets, they did not keep promises. They existed in the present moment, devoid of context. Society treated them with suspicion. Without memory, a person was free, but also unpredictable. No one knew what kept such a person from cruelty or indifference. At the same time, there were those who lost almost nothing. Their bodies retained memories, as if frozen within. These people appeared focused, resilient, yet heavy. They didn't forget their mistakes, didn't let go of their guilt, and didn't let the past become the past. Their leaks were rare but painful. When memory did emerge, it was dense, dark, and intense, proof that holding on is also destructive. Gradually, the world came to understand: memory is not an archive or a resource. It isn't meant to be stored forever. It is alive, physical, and temporary. Leaks began to be perceived not as a loss, but as a process. People began to consciously experience moments, knowing they wouldn't last forever. The value shifted from remember to feel now. This didn't stop the leaks, but it changed their attitude toward them. However, not everyone's fear disappeared. Some continued to fight, hide, hold back, and ignore what was happening. It was for them that the leaks became destructive. Their bodies literally cracked from the strain. The world saw a simple pattern: memory fades not because it's unnecessary, but because it wasn't lived. Everything rejected was repressed by the body without the mind's consent. Over time, it became clear that memory leaks were changing not only people, but the very structure of the world. Spaces began to fill with the past. Old streets held more memories than new neighborhoods. In some places, the air was thick and heavy, years of pain, love, and loss accumulated there. People felt it in their bodies, without even understanding why. Memory ceased to be an internal state. It became part of the landscape, an invisible layer of reality that had to be traversed every day. Places emerged that were avoided. There, the leaks were so dense that other people's memories began to blend. People felt joy that wasn't theirs, fear without cause, a longing for unknown faces. Personality blurred. The boundaries between self and other became thin. Some lost themselves in this flow, forgetting which feelings were their own. For the first time, the world was confronted with the idea that memory could be contagious. And yet, there were people who learned to live in this new world. They didn't try to hold on to memories or strive to rid themselves of them completely. They accepted the leakage like breathing, the inhalation and exhalation of experience. Such people weren't afraid to forget because they knew that the value of a moment doesn't disappear with its memory. Their bodies flowed softly, almost imperceptibly. They had less fear and more presence. Society gradually stopped measuring a person by the size of their memory. Forgetting was no longer considered a weakness. It began to be perceived as a form of forward movement. People began to ask different questions, not, "What do you remember?" but, "What have you lived through?" Mistakes ceased to be a stigma, and the past an anchor. The world became less predictable but more honest. It contained less accumulated baggage and more living choices. However, the illusion of control also disappeared. People understood, memory had never been entirely theirs. She had always been a temporary guest in the body. The leaks only made this obvious. Fear disappeared not when memory was preserved, but when people stopped clinging to it. Loss ceased to be perceived as an end. It became a continuation of life, not its destruction. The world had become different. It was less clear, less archival, less recorded. But it was more present. People looked at each other more often than inward. They knew that even if a memory fades, the moment experienced had already transformed the body. Memory was no longer proof of life. Life itself became proof.